Greetings, viewer. You have joined us on a very special occasion, the time of Hallows Eve. A night which sees all things spooky and terrifying come out to play. Of the many supernatural entities in our world, none is more iconic than the werewolf. On this night, our host, the Rewind Reviewer, is looking at a movie released in the year of 2022, a short film on Disney Plus from the studio known as Marvel. This is his review. Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Rewind Reviews. You may have noticed that the decor has changed a little around here, and that is all in honour of today's movie. The movie that we are going to be looking at today. You know what, I'm just going to sort of do a better accent for now. For today's video, we're going to be looking at Marvel Studios' first Halloween special exclusive for Disney Plus, and that is Werewolf by Night. Marvel's Werewolf by Night is... hang on a sec, that's widescreen. Why is... well, there's no point in doing all this, just get out there. Alright, so when it comes to Werewolf by... get rid of those. Marvel's Werewolf by... I told you. Oh, wait. Go. Stupid bars. Oh. Just, hey. That's enough. Go away. So, Marvel's Werewolf by Night was directed by Michael Giacchino and written by Heather Quinn and Peter Cameron. On a dark and sombre night, a secret cabal of monster hunters emerge from the shadows and gather at the foreboding Bloodstone Temple following the death of their leader. In a strange and macabre memorial to the leader's life, the attendees are thrust into a mysterious and deadly competition for a powerful relic. A hunt that will ultimately bring them face to face with a dangerous monster. The movie stars Gael Garcia Bernal, Laura Donnelly, Harriet Sansom Harris, Kirk R. Thatcher, Carrie Jones, Leonardo Nam, Eugene Bondurant, Daniel J. Watts, Al Hammaker and Richard Dixon. Werewolf by Night is one of the last entries in Marvel's Phase 4, and to say Phase 4 has been a bit divisive is a little bit of an understatement, because many fans across the past 14-15 years that the MCU's been going at this point, they haven't quite matched up to what previous phases have been. Outside of a few gems here and there, I don't think that Phase 4's really been anywhere near as good as the previous phases. So when they announced that this project was going to be coming out, and not only that, it was going to be a bit more of a special rather than a full-on movie, I was intrigued, but I wasn't quite excited enough to really be like, oh, I really want to check this out. And especially with all the new additions to Phase 4 as well, especially in 2022 when this movie was released, because I don't feel like many of them have really sort of been as good as I really thought that they could have been. Like, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was fine, but it had a lot of problems. Moon Knight was a really good show, but I think it kind of fell apart a little towards the end. I thought Miss Marvel was okay overall. I didn't enjoy Thor Love and Thunder. I'm really split on She-Hulk. So as the release date for this one was crawling a bit closer and closer, my excitement wasn't exactly going up. But the reactions that I was hearing from people on social media saying that it was really great, and to the point where they were saying it's one of the best movies of Phase 4, even though it's technically not a movie from Phase 4, I was starting to get a bit more interested in what was going on, especially with the people who were working behind the camera, because I've been a big fan of Michael Giacchino's work for a long time. I love the music and scores that he's come out with. So I was quite amazed seeing that he was quite interested in actually getting behind the camera and actually directing something. So that definitely had me intrigued. Plus we were going to get the introduction of Man-Thing, we were going to get the introduction of the supernatural side of the MCU, which hasn't really been explored. We've had brief glimpses of it in the Doctor Strange movies, as well as a couple of mentions here and there in Loki. So I was curious to see how it was that they were going to handle a lot of these elements. So my excitement was starting to go up a little bit for it. It wasn't until the day that it came out that I remember actually talking to a few people. They'd seen it the day that it came out. Some I couldn't really actually get around to watching it the day it came out. But when I did get around to actually sitting down and watching it, I will quite happily agree that this is one of the best things from Phase 4. The entire movie plays out like a black and white monster movie from like the old Universal Pictures days of like Dracula and the Wolfman and all sorts, and it pays a lot of homages to it, and it draws a lot of influence from those kind of movies. Marvel's been increasingly dipping their toe in horror territory over the past year or so with the likes of Doctor Strange. Even Moon Knight dabbled in it a little bit, so this is like a proper horror movie that takes more influence from what horror movies used to be in the day. In the day, how old am I? But whereas those movies really sort of had more like speckles of horror, they were more superhero movies than anything else, and superhero TV shows. Keep forgetting Moon Knight's TV show. This one is a horror throughout the entire project, and I think that benefits it. I was a bit cautious when I saw the runtime for this because it is about 52 minutes long, which is so much longer than I thought it was going to be, but I still thought, based on everything that they were showing in the trailers, it looks like it's going to be too much. Like, Marvel has had a lot of problems recently where they've just crammed in so much stuff into each of their projects that it's all kind of fallen apart and being quite messy. It's something that She-Hulk sort of poked fun at towards the finale. And initially when they announced that this was going to be like a special, I kind of assumed it was going to be more like the Marvel one-shots, which were about like 20 odd minutes each, but nope. This is the perfect runtime for this kind of movie. It gives enough space to really sort of give the characters time to breathe, so you get to actually see who they are and understand where they come from. Plus it adds to that sense of urgency. Everything is paced very nicely, and I do think that the runtime is just right. That being said, I do think that it could have been maybe just a tiny bit longer, just sort of give a little bit of development to a few of the other characters here and there, because we don't really get to see a lot of them really sort of introduced to them really early on, and then that's really all the sort of development that you get from them. I think Gail Garcia Bernal and Laura Donnelly are absolutely brilliant additions to the MCU. I really like Jake as a character. I think he is a very likeable character. I like how when he's sort of introduced, you're not quite sure what it is that he's there for, and as they sort of explain it over the course of the movie, and I like all those little hints quite early on that something's not quite right with him, just from the way that things are phrased or the way that he interacts with things. I'm not gonna lie, as a Marvel fan, I'm actually not that familiar with Werewolf by Night. I've heard of the character, I might have seen him around, but I've never really sort of read any stories with him, so I didn't really know who Jack Russell was. When they introduce him, part of me was thinking, oh, he's going to be like the main character and he's going after the werewolf, but I wasn't quite aware of where the story was actually going with him. So it was a pretty fun surprise, and I do love the contrast of the two versions of this character, where he is really nice and friendly and he's just really likeable when you meet him as Jack, but when he turns into the werewolf, I think the way that they handle it is brilliant. I do like the way he looks. I do think that they might have pushed it a bit more into like monster territory, but I think that it does work very well. I think it makes it look very believable, and I think that it's actually quite a nice design, partly because he does keep a lot of those human characteristics where you can still see his eyes and the way that he has that connection with Elsa. I think that is handled really well. I do like that the design actually does sort of benefit that. And Elsa herself, I do think she is actually a pretty good character to being introduced in this, because there is a lot of dimension to her. I like how they do sort of go into her backstory with her family, the Bloodstones. Again, I've heard the name, but I've never really read any stories, so I'm not quite sure what direction the character has gone in the comics. But for this movie, I do think she is integrated very well. I think the performance from Laura Donnelly is really good. She does have a bit of a Jessica Jones kind of vibe with just her attitude towards everything, which can make for a really interesting dynamic between her and Jack, because Jack's quite chatty and he doesn't really sort of shut up during a lot of their scenes. She just doesn't seem to really care very much, and she does have some really great fight scenes as well. I think she handles herself really well. As I said, because I'm not aware of who these characters are from the comics, I'm not sure if she has any sort of abilities or anything, because I would have assumed maybe she might have had like a slightly higher endurance or strength, because there's scenes of her getting absolutely slapped around in this and she doesn't really seem that fazed by it, and she just sort of carries on and keeps going. So does she have super strength? But I do think both characters are done very well. I love the performances from both actors, and I think that they have a really great future ahead of them in terms of the MCU. The other big standout for me is Harriet Sansom Harris, because if you're somebody who's watched Frasier, you're sort of aware of the sort of characters that she has played in the past. And I think the role that she has in this is absolutely perfect for her. I think she is brilliantly cast. She really leans into the more cheesy or over the top stuff, and just like she really goes for it, and I just absolutely love her in this. I'll be honest, I didn't actually realise it was her. Like, I had seen the trailer, but I didn't really pick up that it was actually her playing it, and I said, like, I loved her in Frasier. Her character in Frasier is one of my favourites of the entire show, so when I realised it was her, I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And she is great, and I do love everything that she does bring to this role. They do try to flesh out as much of her character as they can. They do sort of give her a bit of depth and a bit of backstory, but when it comes to all the other hunters who are included in this, they don't really care that much. One negative that I can really think of is the other hunters, because I feel like they could have built those characters up a little bit more, like in the style of like an Alien kind of thing. But it's not really too big of a criticism, because I do think that it is fine as is, and I do think that everyone is given the time that they really sort of needed. I mean, it's only 50 minutes long and you can't really get around so many characters in that short time. And finally, after 9 years of teasing, we finally have Man-Thing. Unlike most of the other characters in this, I'm a little bit more familiar with Man-Thing. I am sort of aware of what he can do and who he is. I always kind of wondered if they actually would bring him into the MCU, because as I said, he's been teased since 2013. Like, there's a character called Ellen Brandt who's in Iron Man 3. She's got like scars and all sorts on her face, and she's got an arm missing. A lot of people said that she's actually connected to Man-Thing, so that's kind of like the first hint that he might exist. And then when you skip forward to Thor Ragnarok, on the side of the Grandmaster's like castle, he's actually got like a head of Man-Thing actually on it, alongside Beta Ray Bill and a few of the other Guardians like Ares. So it is cool actually getting to properly see him. And as I said, I don't know that much about him outside of like basic knowledge, so I was curious to learn a bit more about him and actually see what it is about him that people really love. And I can really see why, because he is a really likeable character. I love how he looks, I love how he sounds. It's very accurate to all the pictures that I've seen of him. He looks incredible, and the fact that he's only 50% CG, he's, well, 50% thereabouts. There was actually a proper model of him on the set that they used for, I don't know how much of it was like reference, how much of it was just animatronics, and I think it is blurred together very nicely. I do think the effects actually do enhance it very well, and I think when the movie does turn into colour, it is really nice. I think that he does look great. When it comes to the story for this short, it's actually a pretty simple story, because it doesn't need to be this big, overly complicated, interconnected story with everything else. It's very much its own thing. I like how it is something that you can literally just watch on its own. You don't need knowledge of anything else. It's short, it's simple, it's to the point. It allows moments of character, it allows tension to be built up and the suspense. It's what's needed for this, and I really do like it. Visually, I think it looks incredible. It's really immersive. I love how it is all completely black and white, apart from the Bloodstone, which has got like this shiny red colour, so anytime it's on screen, that's the only bit of colour that you see. Some really great shots and sequences in this, like the way that like you've got Jake when he's like walking through the forest, and you've got like that guy with the trombone, like it's all lighting up as they're going through. It looks really great and ominous. They really do make use of the environments that they're in. There's even a few really cool one-take sequences in this, like especially during like the final battle with the actual werewolf, when there's like a scene where the camera like pans across to this doorway and you've got all these soldiers that are like around, and it's just slowly panning in, and the werewolf's jumping at them, just scratching them up left and right, and the screen's getting splattered with blood. You've got the door shutting, all the light fading out. It looks incredible. All the staging, the cinematography, the lighting, it works incredibly well and very effectively in this, and I think the direction that Michael Giacchino has brought to this is fantastic. There really is nothing Michael Giacchino can't do. I mean, as I say, like, I absolutely love his soundtracks, and he has done the soundtrack for this as well, and I think it is just as good as a lot of the other ones he has done. Most of the stuff that I've heard him do in the past, I thought, were some of my favourite soundtracks, and I think especially a lot of the ones that he's done for the MCU. So seeing how he's kind of gone on to now do this, I really do hope that he does get to do more stuff like this in the future. I hope that he does get to do more, not necessarily in the MCU, but filmmaking as a whole. I hope that he does get the chance to go on and do other projects. And when it comes to a lot of the technology and the techniques that they were using, they've kind of done similarly to what they did with WandaVision, where they actually used a lot of the technology from the time era that this movie kind of emulates. Because as far as I'm aware, this movie takes place in like the present day MCU. It's about 2025 or something like that, but it does feel like it could take place at any point in time, and the way that it's shot does add to that, complete with all like even like this little cigarette burns in the top left corner. It's very accurate to that time period with all the more practical stuff that they are trying to bring into it. The way that the dark and the light is contrasted well enough that you can see everything. It's not all sort of a bit muddled in the way that some movies will be if you just do black and white transition. It's so accurate that even the opening titles are kind of like those big artwork drawings that you normally find at the beginning of all the old movies, plus even the way that they've got like the little cigarette burns in the top corner. It's really well made, and I do appreciate that Marvel did take the risk and actually did this. One other thing that I actually really did appreciate in this is the fact that Marvel are actually starting to be a bit more ballsy when it comes to what it is that they're actually doing, because this is a lot more violent and gruesome than I was expecting it to be. The action sequences and fight sequences are handled really well, and I do think that because of how brutal it is, I am surprised that it still sort of gets away with a slightly younger age rating, purely because it is all black and white. And they've even openly admitted this, and they said that because it is very graphic at times, that if it was done in colour and you saw the blood and everything that was going on, it would have been rated a lot higher than it is. But because it is all black and white, and because there's so many shadows that kind of hide everything, you can kind of get away with it. So you got people getting like ripped up by the werewolf, you got somebody's arm getting chopped up, somebody getting slammed against a staircase, and all. So it's pretty extreme. Even though, you know, it's nowhere near on the same level as something like Deadpool or Watchmen or anything like that. But I do appreciate that they are starting to kind of go a bit more in this direction, or at least taking the risk and actually having a section of the MCU that is starting to kind of go in this direction, because I'm very fearful of where Blade and things like that are going to be when they're introduced into the MCU. So seeing this and seeing how this project's handled is giving me a bit more hope that maybe Blade, Ghost Rider, potentially Punisher will actually be handled in a proper way. I did think one scene was going to go a bit further than it actually was, and it's a scene where the werewolf's being turned. Ursa, who's just changed him, and she's like standing right close to the cage, and then like grabs her and then like yanks her arm in, and then there's just like this close-up of her eyes, and I thought that he was like ripping her arm off and all sorts, but they don't really do that, and I'm not quite sure why they had to sort of film it like that, and why that seems really sort of in there. So that's one of the only times I will say I think they could have gone a little bit further with it. But I do like how it does completely embrace being a horror movie, because it is filled with a few jump scares. I'll admit that they didn't really faze me that much. They're not as bad as other things I have seen over the years, but they are built up nicely, they are done very well. I do think the people who aren't expecting things like that will jump. There is a really great sense of tension and timing in this, because there is kind of an against the clock angle that they do have, and I really do like how that is handled. It's also the first time I've seen a lot of supernatural creatures being introduced into the MCU. Like, I'm not quite sure what some of them actually are, to be honest. There's something that looks quite close like the Wendigo, but I don't think that's what it is. There's like one creature that sort of looks like a weird kind of vampire, but I'm not quite sure if that was. So I'm happy that they are starting to integrate a lot more of this stuff into the MCU, because I never thought that they actually would go ahead with it, but it looks like they are, and I'm really happy about that. When it comes to the effects, I am really surprised how practical this movie is, because there's so many real elements in this, and it really adds to the authenticity of it. From the sets, the makeup, the animatronics, the designs, everything does work very well, and I do think that everything is used well. Considering like Marvel has kind of gone into a bit of an over-reliance on CGI in like the past few years, and with the rate that a lot of these movies and projects are kind of getting churned out, I can see why they are doing it, purely because it might be a bit quicker to do, which is really unfortunate for all the VFX artists who do work on these projects. So I really do appreciate that they did try going a bit more practical with this one, because I do think that it does add to this. I do feel like it does make this one stand out a lot more against a lot of the other films. I really do love the sets that they have used in this. I love the manor with like all the heads of all the creatures on the walls and all the paintings and everything, plus the actual like a big maze that they've built for all the hunters. I think that it is used well, because they really are integrating this environment into the story, and it does make it a lot more believable. But when it comes to the actual CG effects in this movie, you can say it with me if you want, it could have been a little better. That being said, I mean, some of it actually does look a lot better than many of the more recent projects that we have had. I do think that Man-Thing is brought to life in a very nice way, and I do think it is a really good mixture of both real and CG. But I do think there are a few elements that are a lot more noticeable, like a few of the more bloodier scenes, plus like even just like the spiders in this tomb. I think they look a little bit too cartoony. They could have improved how some of this stuff does look, but it never takes you out of the movie, and It's only really used when it's actually absolutely necessary, so I really do appreciate that, and to be honest, it does make this a little bit better. But one thing I definitely can't fault, and that's the music for this, because yes, once again, Michael Giacchino has returned to the MCU to create a really great score for this movie. It sounds amazing. I think that there is a really great atmospheric tone to it. It does have that darkness that this project does need, but it does borrow a lot of elements of those old school movies. It definitely helps that Michael Giacchino is the director for this, because he is able to kind of tailor a lot of the music to the scenes and the way that things are filmed, because potentially he will have had an idea of how the movie was going to play out, how various scenes were going to be shot and everything, and how it needed to sound whenever this stuff was playing out. So I think it really has benefited that, and I think that it really does help elevate this movie. It sounds very different from anything that we have had in the MCU before, and I really do like how different it is. It does sound great. There's not a lot of variety to all the themes that we have, but I do think that the main theme for this is actually quite memorable, and I do like it. And that does extend to the songs as well, because there's only a couple of songs that are used in this, but they're all from like the 1930s kind of era, and I think they are used very well. I do like where it is that they are integrated, because Somewhere Over the Rainbow is absolutely beautiful song from Wizard of Oz, and I love how it actually references that movie, because when it's playing, the movie becomes colour, and I think that it is a beautiful scene. I think it is really well done, and I like not only the callback but the fact that they go ahead and actually do it. I wasn't expecting the movie to actually have any actual like colour sequences outside of maybe like the main titles at the end, but I really do appreciate we do get to see at least some things in colour, mainly because you kind of get to see a bit more detail on a lot of the designs, like all the patterns and everything on Jake's face, as well as how they've handled Man-Thing and all the detail on his body. I think because it was all in black and white, a lot of that does kind of get a little bit washed out and you can't really see it, but because it's now all in colour you can actually see all that detail, and I really do appreciate that they have done that. Overall, I think this movie is brilliant. It's a very big risk making a movie like this nowadays, but it really does pay off very well. It does stand out a lot from many projects, not only in the MCU but in the industry as a whole. All the elements that were brought into this make it what it is, and I think that it really does benefit it so much, and I do really love what they have done with this film. The cinematography, the music, the sets, the makeup, the costumes, everything about it does work very well. Outside of a few little minor issues here and there, I think it is a very good film. I love the new characters that they've introduced. I love Jake, I love Elsa, I love Man-Thing. I really hope that we do get to see more of them in the future. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it is that they do go from here. The supernatural side of the MCU is only really just starting to get tapped into, and I really hope that it does get explored a lot more in the future. I also want to reiterate that what Michael Giacchino has done is absolutely brilliant. I really hope that he does get to do some more projects in the future. As I said, there's only a few little minor nitpicks here and there. Like, I think that there could have been a bit of development for some of the other characters. I feel like there could have been times when I think it should have been a little bit longer, but that's really only the issues that I do have with it. If you're a Marvel fan, if you're an MCU fan, I highly recommend having a look at this. This is a brilliant movie. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think if you're looking for something spooky to watch over Halloween, I think this is actually a really great addition to the Halloween lineup, and I really would recommend adding this to the collection, you know, on your Disney Plus account. It's a really good standalone project, and I think that general audience members, I think you'll have a really great time with it. There's no prior knowledge needed. You don't necessarily need to see where things are going in the future either. I think that you can just watch this as is and have a great time with it. So with all that being said, my rating for Werewolf by Night is 9 out of 10. Honestly, if this is what all the specials are going to be like going forwards, then I'm really looking forward to seeing what it is that they are going to do with more projects. Because we've got the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special coming up in December, which I'm really looking forward to. The trailer does look really good and it does look really fun. We've also been hearing a lot of reports that a few future projects that are going to be coming out, which were meant to be TV series, are now being turned into specials. I've heard rumours that we might be getting a Silver Surfer special as well as a Nova special, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what it is that these specials can do for the MCU. There has actually been a fan theory that maybe what they are planning on doing is when the X-Men are introduced into the MCU, we're going to see a lot of shorts actually talking about each of those characters and giving each of them their own origins, which I'm fully on board with, by the way, but only if they're able to maintain the quality of this. So that is pretty much everything I've got to say for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. Oh, come on. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you've enjoyed this content, please like, please subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Hit the notification button as well to keep up to date on everything that's going on here. If you've seen Werewolf by Night, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. If you have any suggestions for future Rewind reviews that you'd like to see me do, whether it's film, TV, games, let me know and I'll try and get round to them soon. Also let me know if you have any ideas for what sort of shorts Marvel should do in the future. Thank you so much for watching and happy Halloween.